Zora Bennett stepped out of the black sedan with the quiet authority of someone who didn't need to announce herself. Her low-heeled shoes touched the marble entrance like the first note of a familiar symphony, measured, deliberate, undeniable. Yet, in front of the Bennett Grand Hotel, no one noticed. No bellhop approached. No concierge opened the door. She paused, staring up at the building she had rebuilt from ruin. 15 years ago, it was a bankrupt shell at the edge of Atlanta's financial district. Now the Bennett Grand stood as an icon of luxury and multicultural excellence in hospitality. And still, not a single employee recognized the black woman of 41 who had created it all. "Good afternoon," she said politely to the man at the front with a tablet tucked under his arm. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked her up and down with that weary, indifferent stare reserved for people assumed to be lost or beneath protocol. "Checking in?" he asked with casual dismissal. "Actually," Zora replied, offering a restrained smile. "I'm here for an executive walkthrough." The man's expression shifted, slightly confused, slightly annoyed. "Name and company?" "Zora Bennett, Bennett Holdings." The pause that followed was sharp and awkward. He typed something into his device, then frowned. "There's no visit scheduled under that name," he said. "And Miss Bennett is the founder, right? She doesn't make unscheduled appearances. She definitely doesn't arrive without her security team." Zora met his eyes, that old familiar ache pressing behind her ribs, the ache that came with not being seen, even when you owned the building. The same ache she'd felt at age 10 when her mother, an aerospace engineer, was mistaken for a janitor at a tech conference. "I am the founder," she said simply. The man scoffed. "I'm going to have to ask you to wait outside while I contact management." Zora took a slow breath. Inside the lobby, she could see the details she'd approved personally: reclaimed mahogany, warm gold fixtures, curated art from local black artists. All hers, all distant. "I'll wait," she said. But she didn't wait long. Within minutes, 2 security guards emerged from the side hallway. One of them, the younger of the two, whispered something to the front desk clerk. He nodded toward Zora with a dramatic eye roll. "Ma'am," the older guard said, stepping forward, "we're going to need you to leave the property. You're trespassing." "Trespassing?" Zora blinked. "On my own property?" "We don't want any issues," the younger one added. "Let's not make a scene." Zora's eyes narrowed, not with fear, but with something colder. She pulled out her phone, tapped once, and held it against her thigh. "I'm sure this will be dealt with soon," she said quietly. But the older guard had already motioned toward the door. "Ma'am, now." She walked, not because she had to, but because she had learned long ago that the most devastating storms begin with stillness. 9 minutes later, the sky would break. As she exited the lobby, her phone buzzed. A message from Karina Liu, her chief operating officer. "We saw everything. Full systems access being restored. Waiting for your word." Zora climbed back into the black sedan, shutting the door behind her. From the rear seat, she watched the hotel entrance disappear behind tinted glass. And then she smiled. If this story of injustice and transformation moved you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories that turn pain into power. Zora didn't speak as the car pulled away from the hotel's front entrance. The silence inside the sedan was thick, but it wasn't empty. It was focused, calculated, sharp as a blade. Her COO, Karina Liu, sat beside her, eyes locked on her phone, thumbs moving fast. "We've locked all staff badges from the 2nd floor and up. Emergency protocol is active. Legal is watching the lobby footage now." "And the board?" Zora asked, her voice low and unhurried. "They're on standby for a Zoom call in 13 minutes. I told them this wasn't a drill." Zora nodded, eyes fixed on the reflection of her own face in the window. Calm, poised, but underneath something far older stirred, a rage shaped by years of being told to wait, to explain, to earn what she already owned. 9 minutes. 9 minutes ago, she had been escorted out of her own hotel like a trespasser. Now, she was holding the company's nerve center in the palm of her hand. Back inside the Bennett Grand, the staff was beginning to panic. At the front desk, the tablet the concierge had used to mock Zora flashed red. "Access denied. Must be a glitch," he muttered, tapping it again. Nothing. The security team tried to use their badges to access the executive elevators. Nothing. Then the side stairwell. Also locked. Doors beeped and flashed red as a quiet, invisible wall descended between the ground level and the rest of the building. In the control room, the hotel's IT manager, Tony, frowned as his monitor refreshed. All admin privileges had been revoked. Even his root-level credentials were frozen. The cursor blinked mockingly at him. What the hell? At that exact moment, every screen in the lobby changed. The digital wall panels, the LED displays, even the elevator directory. All replaced with one line of text. You don't remove a queen from her castle. You remind her why she built it. ZB. It was subtle, elegant, unmistakable. Employees and guests alike turned to read it. A quiet murmur moved through the room. Back in the sedan, Zora leaned forward and tapped the intercom. "Take me to our downtown legal office, boardroom 3. "Yes, ma'am," the driver replied without hesitation. Karina glanced at her. "You ready to go public with this?" Zora let out a soft breath. "I'm not doing this just for me." She reached into her bag and pulled out a small, velvet-covered folder. Inside were the names and photos of 6 employees who had been quietly pushed out of the hotel over the last year. A black pastry chef fired for being too informal with guests. A disabled Latina front desk manager whose shifts had mysteriously been reduced until she quit. An Ethiopian housekeeper whose ideas for sustainability had been stolen and rebranded under someone else's name. "They didn't just try to erase me," Zora said, voice steady. "They tried to erase all of us." Karina nodded slowly. "It's time, then." By the time the car reached the law offices, Zora's phone buzzed again. A secure link. She opened it and watched the live feed of the hotel lobby. The new general manager, a man she hadn't approved, stood near the reception desk, arguing with 2 assistants. His face was beet red. The digital panels continued to display her message. Zora clicked to unmute. "I don't care if the system's down. Get someone on the phone," he barked. "Who the hell is doing this?" And just as he said it, his voice was drowned out by the soft chime of the hotel's emergency broadcast system. Zora's voice came through the speakers, clear, controlled, and devastating. "This is Dr. Zora Bennett, founder and chief executive officer of Bennett Holdings. As of this moment, the Bennett Grand Hotel is under executive review. All managerial operations have been suspended. Department heads are to report to the mezzanine conference room immediately. Security, please escort Mr. Hayes out of the building." The camera feed caught the look of shock on his face, followed by 2 private security officers, ones Zora had hired personally before her sabbatical, stepping into frame. She watched him protest, shout, flail. Watched him be walked out in the same way she had been, only he didn't go with grace. Zora closed the video and looked at Karina. "That's one," she said softly. 9 minutes had passed. 1 public humiliation, 1 executive removed. 1 empire reclaimed. And this was only the beginning. 9 minutes of silence. That's all it took for the entire architecture of betrayal to begin crumbling from the inside. Zora sat alone in the glass-walled conference room of her legal offices, staring down at the sleek black table, her fingers folded under her chin. Around her, the skyline of Atlanta glittered with quiet arrogance, but the only reflection she saw was her own, and it burned. Karina entered softly. "The board is logging into the call now. You still want to handle this solo?" Zora nodded. "They need to hear it from me, unfiltered." Karina paused. "Zora, you don't owe them calm." "I'm not being calm for them." She adjusted her cufflinks, the initials ZB engraved in silver. "I'm being surgical. Karina left and the door clicked shut behind her. One by one, the faces appeared on screen. 11 board members, 9 white men, 1 Asian woman, 1 older black investor who looked deeply concerned. A few fidgeted, a few cleared throats. Only one spoke first. "Zora, we just got the alerts from Central Access. Is this some kind of—" "Let me stop you there," she said sharply, raising her eyes to meet the camera. "You can call it an overreaction, a stunt, a meltdown. But I suggest you hold your questions until I'm finished. What I'm about to show you isn't speculation. Systemic rot. Under our roof. A click. A file loaded onto the shared screen. Audit La 147. Executive Misconduct Review. Confidential." Zora continued. "6 months ago, I commissioned a blind internal audit under the code name Monarch Initiative. I suspected irregularities. What I found was targeted exclusion, fraudulent restructuring, and weaponized incompetence. A graph appeared, hiring data, promotions, resignations. In every category, a clear pattern. People of color, especially women, were being removed quietly, stalled, reassigned, and then erased. Over 20 employees either fired or pressured out in the last 18 months, Zora said, voice tightening. Of those, 17 were black. 4 of them had MBAs from Ivy League schools. None were ever reported as performance risks. One of the board members leaned forward. "Wait, this can't be real." "These numbers, they were buried," Zora said. "Approved through regional directors. Sanitized by the same manager who had me thrown out of my own hotel lobby this morning." Gasps flickered through the call. "I gave that man a second-tier position in facilities while I was abroad. He was never authorized to run operations. But someone—" She fixed her gaze on the 2 board members who had pushed for him last quarter. "Promoted him behind my back. Without a vote. Zora, we didn't know. You didn't want to know," she snapped. "Because comfort has always been more important than equity. You liked the look of diversity in your annual reports. You just didn't want it in the executive wing." A new slide. Email correspondence. Subject: "Make it look voluntary." It was a message from HR to the regional VP. Zora let the words speak for themselves. "If we reassign her to the call center floor, she'll quit within 2 weeks. Use the standard realignment language to avoid conflict, and no paper trail." She was Tiana Williams, former hospitality director, now unemployed. "I'm not just firing one man," Zora said, looking each board member in the eye. "I'm gutting the mold. Today I removed 7 department heads. By end of week, another 12 will be dismissed. Every single person who contributed to this pattern of exclusion is gone." The silence on the call was thick with disbelief. The older black investor finally spoke. "What do you need from us?" Zora leaned back. "Your vote to dissolve the current executive committee. Full restructure. We relaunch under the Monarch Initiative. Effective immediately. I'm not asking. I'm offering the chance to be on the right side of this moment." "And if we refuse?" one man asked flatly. Zora didn't flinch. "Then I take it public. The audit, the emails, the surveillance footage of me being removed from my own lobby. All of it. Within the hour." Another beat of silence, and then slowly the votes came in. Approved. 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 11 green lights. Zora nodded. "Thank you. Expect transition briefings within 48 hours. Meeting adjourned." She ended the call before anyone could offer a platitude. Karina re-entered holding a phone. "Media's asking questions. You want a statement?" Zora stood and smoothed her jacket. "Yeah." "Tell them this. Today, the Bennett Grand Hotel chose integrity over inertia. The founder has returned, and we're cleaning house." Karina smiled. Zora walked past her, calm as ever, fire beneath her heels. 9 minutes had passed, and the reckoning had just begun. The Bennett Grand Hotel didn't just feel different, it pulsed with it. From the moment Zora re-entered the building through the executive entrance, the air had shifted. No fanfare, no red carpet. Just the quiet click of her heels on the polished floor and the heavy hush that followed her in every hallway. A new security team flanked her, all of them briefed and handpicked. Every badge scan lit green for her and red for those who'd once dared lock her out. Upstairs, chaos reigned in controlled silence. The hotel's management suite, once buzzing with unchecked egos and toxic camaraderie, now stood hollow. Offices abandoned, coffee still steaming on some desks. Passwords changed, desktops wiped, phone lines rerouted. Zora walked through the corridor like a queen surveying a battlefield post-victory, not to gloat, but to understand the extent of the damage. Karina followed behind her with a tablet displaying real-time logs, access denials, deactivated profiles, the cascade of firewalls that now divided the hotel into before and after. They entered the command hub, operations control. All screens were live. One wall showed internal security footage, another the hotel's financial dashboards. A third displayed something far more personal, employee satisfaction data collected through anonymous surveys Zora had implemented years ago and that had mysteriously gone dark. Until now. "I want all suppressed reports from the last 18 months restored," she ordered. One of the technicians, an intern she had once met during a mentorship panel, nodded. "Already running, Doctor." Bennett. The title struck her a little differently today. A message popped up on the main screen, initiating recovery 842 entries unarchived. Karina exhaled. They buried it all. Zora scanned the first few entries, line after line of warning signs, microaggressions dismissed by HR, promotions frozen without explanation, complaints about cultural fit used as cover for coded exclusion. One note caught her eye. "We were told to stop calling her doctor." Bennett because it made certain guests uncomfortable. Her jaw clenched. She turned to the lead tech. "I want this data compiled into a report. Today. I'm meeting with press tomorrow and I want to walk them through every inch of it." "Yes, ma'am." She moved to the communication console. "Broadcast live message to all hotel floors," she said. Karina's eyebrows lifted. "You sure you want to go public before the media?" Zora nodded. "My people hear it first." The system beeped as it connected to every hallway speaker, every employee device, every hotel staff channel. Zora pressed the mic button and began. "This is Dr. Zora Bennett. If you're hearing my voice, you work in a place that bears my name. That means your dignity is not optional, it is policy." She paused. "In the last year, some of you were overlooked, silenced, humiliated, or worse, pushed out. That ends today. I've returned to do more than clean house. I've come to rebuild the foundation." Her voice didn't tremble. It carved through walls. "Effective immediately, all staff terminations over the past 18 months are under review. Every unjust dismissal will be investigated. Every promotion blocked without cause will be revisited. And every voice that was ignored will be heard." The room around her was silent, save for the soft hum of machines updating decades of suppressed data. "To the guest staying with us, you are in a hotel that believes in transparency. To the employees still working, know that the chain of command has changed. You now answer to a code of ethics, not a culture of fear. And to those who tried to dismantle what I built, my face may have been missing from your photos, but my name is on every stone in this building." She ended the broadcast. Silence followed. Then, a soft ping. A message from the cleaning staff group chat. Zora wasn't in the group, but Karina was. She turned the screen so Zora could see. "She's back. Did you hear what she said? She said our names matter. Finally. We saw her get escorted out. Now she's firing them. I think I might cry." Zora didn't smile, not yet. There was still more to do. The board hadn't seen it coming, not the speed, not the scope, and certainly not the fire. By the time Zora's internal review was complete, 22 managers across departments had been flagged for ethical violations. 19 of them had quietly approved harmful restructuring proposals. 4 had redirected funds earmarked for diversity initiatives, and all of them had signed off on the hiring of the new general manager, without her knowledge or consent. Zora stood now in the heart of the Bennett Grand's Executive Auditorium, a circular chamber built for vision, not vanity. It had once hosted top-tier investors and international partners. Today, it held something far rarer: accountability. A large screen behind her displayed a live dashboard titled Leadership Compliance Audit, Phase 1, Exposed Systems. Each infraction was cross-referenced with surveillance footage, financial records, email chains, and internal chat logs. There was no room for ambiguity, no deniability. Karina stood at her side, but Zora did the talking. "Let's be clear," Zora said, her voice echoing through the silent room. These weren't isolated errors. They were deliberate actions taken to push out voices that didn't conform to a specific mold, and I will not allow my name to be attached to any structure that benefits from silence. On the screen appeared the name of Franklin Miles, Regional VP of Operations. He had personally greenlit the demotion of 3 women of color without merit-based justification. His reasoning? Lack of leadership presence. Franklin Miles is no longer with the company, Zora announced calmly. Effective immediately, his position will be filled by one of the women he pushed out, Angela Reeves, Masters in Organizational Management, 12 years with this company, never once disciplined. The only thing she lacked was favoritism. Karina stepped forward and handed Zora a sleek folder. The board's vote to reauthorize the Monarch Initiative grants you full executive power for 6 months, she said aloud, not just for Zora, but for the room full of legal counsel, department heads, and journalists now granted limited access to the event. Zora opened the folder slowly. "And I plan to use every second." A reporter in the back, from the Atlanta Daily Voice, stood. "Dr. Bennett, can you comment on the rumors that several terminated employees have filed countersuits?" Zora didn't blink. "They're welcome to, and I invite them to explain under oath why so many of their emails contain phrases like cleaning up the optics and too urban for leadership branding." A hushed gasp moved through the room. A second screen now lit up, revealing a series of anonymous staff surveys and whistleblower reports. "Months ago, I suspected there was more happening than numbers could show," Zora said. "So I commissioned a third-party audit and authorized complete anonymity." She clicked her remote. "I was told not to speak Spanish on staff calls. Our manager said natural hair made us look unprofessional. One VP referred to a black guest as a diversity quota come to life. When I reported it, they reassigned me." Zora turned away from the screen and faced the room. "I built this hotel on 3 principles: dignity, excellence, and authenticity. And yet somewhere in the rush to expand, we allowed fear to masquerade as professionalism. We let bias hide behind the language of fit. No more." Another reporter raised her hand. "You said earlier that this isn't just about removing people. So what happens next?" Zora's eyes softened, but her tone remained firm. "We don't just remove, we rebuild." She nodded to Karina, who tapped on her tablet. Another screen rose, revealing a new initiative: Bennett Ascend, a program designed to identify, mentor, and fast-track underrepresented talent already within the hotel's ranks. No more closed-door opportunities. No more referrals that only came from country clubs and legacy lists. "Within 1 month," Zora continued, "every department will host internal pitch sessions. You have ideas. You present them. You've been overlooked. We put your file on the table. And any manager caught suppressing potential will be removed. No discussion." The applause began slowly, from a few of the department heads in the back, then louder, from members of the press who had quietly followed Zora's rise for years. But most importantly, it came from the employees watching the live broadcast in break rooms, kitchens, and maintenance corridors. For the first time, they weren't invisible. Zora stood motionless at the center of it all, her fingers resting lightly on the edge of the podium. She wasn't just reclaiming a company. She was cracking the concrete of a system designed to bury people like her, only to plant something stronger in its place. It was called the Anonymous Audit, but inside Zora's private files it had another name, the Truth File. 6 weeks before she had walked into the hotel lobby and been treated like a stranger in her own empire, Zora had quietly hired an independent firm led by black and brown investigators to conduct a deep-dive review of hiring practices, departmental behavior, and internal messaging. What they uncovered wasn't just unethical, it was coordinated. Now, in a smaller room lit only by 2 hanging industrial lamps and the faint blue glow of a projection screen, Zora stood with Karina and 3 internal investigators from the firm. They were combing through the final findings, piece by piece. The data shows, one investigator said, that at least 5 regional directors were actively sharing a strategy playbook for removing non-conforming staff. They used coded language, selective demotions, and falsified metrics. Zora nodded slowly, her arms crossed. Define non-conforming. The woman flipped a page in the report. Too assertive, too cultural, too academic. One file literally says, doesn't play the optics game. Translation, Karina muttered. Smart, principled, and not afraid to show up black. Another page glowed on the screen. It was a group chat transcript, one that included former executives, some still under contract. The messages were crude and coded. Board won't notice the staffing shuffle as long as we keep the brochure faces in place. We cut 2 birds, Tiana and Jerome. That should lower the heat. Bring in someone less visible this time. Bennett's still in Europe, use it. She's too busy speaking at panels to see what's happening under her nose. LOL. Let the Queen lecture while we clean house. Zora stood still. Her pulse didn't race. Her hands didn't shake, but her silence was thunderous. Pull up their severance packages, she said. Karina tapped her tablet. Already frozen. Legal's preparing breach of contract notices for all of them. Misconduct voids their exit payouts. Zora tilted her head. Good, but that's not enough. She turned to the investigator. Did you find out who approved the restructuring of the Bennett Fellowship program? He nodded. It was buried under budget optimization, but we found the edits. They changed the criteria so it would exclude non-business majors. Then they shut down the mentorship wing, citing low engagement. Zora's jaw clenched. That program was created to elevate first-gen college students. Students like I was. She turned back to the wall of evidence. They didn't just sabotage careers. They tried to erase a vision. There was a long pause. No one spoke. And then Zora stepped forward and tapped the screen, pulling up a live network connection to the Bennett Grand's internal servers. In seconds, her admin access brought up the system that managed professional development, HR, and promotions. Restore the Bennett Fellowship Program, she said, effective today. Karina raised an eyebrow. You want to go with the original structure? Zora smiled for the first time in hours, small, sharp, and full of purpose. No, I want it bigger. Add vocational paths, add language services, remove the GPA minimum, and replace it with real-world leadership evaluations. And rename it. To what? Karina asked. Zora looked back at the chat transcript, at the words, "Let the Queen lecture." Then she said, almost too softly to hear, "The Crown Initiative." Karina blinked. That's good, Zora nodded. Let them know the crown they tried to knock off became the foundation of an empire. Moments later, an email blast went out to the entire company network. Subject: The Crown Initiative has launched. This program is designed to identify overlooked brilliance, fund underrepresented potential, and give access to the mentorship and leadership support you were once denied. If you've been told you're too loud, too ambitious, too real, too different, then you are exactly who we've been waiting for. Dr. Zora Bennett, CEO, Bennett Holdings. As the email traveled through servers and devices, whispers began to spread through staff lounges and private chats. People who had once felt small, isolated, or forgotten now saw something that looked like justice. And more than that, reclamation. Zora watched the confirmations ping, one after another. She didn't feel victorious. She felt like she was finally back in alignment, with the mission, with her name, with the fire that first built the hotel from rubble. They underestimated one thing, she said quietly, almost to herself. Karina glanced up. What? Zora's voice was calm. That a black woman with power doesn't cling to the throne. She builds doors into the palace. The doors didn't slam shut. They sealed like judgment. Across the Bennett Grand Hotel, badge access failed in synchronized precision. Managers who had avoided every staff complaint, who had smiled through ethics trainings with empty eyes, now stood outside their offices with blinking red indicators and no answers. It began at 7:45 a.m. By 7:50, panic had set in. By 8:00, the housekeepers and bellhops were the only staff members still operating at full access. Zora sat in the monitoring suite, watching it all unfold. The real-time security feed flickered between departments, sales, catering, concierge. She watched as the same pattern repeated, confusion, denial, then dawning fear. Protocol Everest is in full effect, Karina confirmed. No entry above level 3 clearance without your biometric authorization. Zora nodded. And HR? They're ready. A few floors below, the mezzanine conference room had been converted into a transition center. Representatives from legal and human resources waited with sealed folders, pre-printed termination letters, and severance recalculations, all pre-vetted, all ironclad. And outside that room, a new team stood by. Not just security, but staff volunteers, people from admin, IT, even maintenance. Those who had quietly stood by Zora's vision all along, now tasked with escorting out those who betrayed it. It wasn't revenge. It was design. At 8:15 a.m., the first to be called was Lyle Mathers, Director of Guest Experience, a man known for slick PR tactics and private comments like, "Let's keep the face of the brand less urban." He didn't go quietly. "This is insane," he barked at the assistant who handed him his notice. "You don't just erase a decade of service over a few disagreements." Zora's voice rang out from the screen mounted on the wall behind the HR desk. "Disagreements don't require non-disclosure settlements, Lyle." The room froze. It was a live feed. Zora, composed and unmoved. "Disagreements don't result in internal complaints buried for 18 months. They don't involve misappropriating grant funds meant for accessibility services." Lyle stared into the camera. "You can't just wipe us all out?" Zora blinked slowly. "I already did." The elevator behind him dinged open. 2 security officers stood waiting. As Lyle left, the next name was called, then another and another. By 9 a.m., 14 department heads had been relieved. 5 more were in holding, pending legal review. The entire upper tier of the hotel's leadership had been replaced within 90 minutes. And outside, just beyond the walls where so many had been ignored, applause began to ripple. It wasn't loud, but it was real. In the break rooms, in the kitchens, in the service hallways, employees stood shoulder to shoulder, watching the live updates on internal screens. Every time a name flashed red, terminated, someone whispered, "Finally." In the laundry unit, the longest-serving worker, Miss Teresa, turned to her colleague and said, "I never thought I'd live to see them fall." And still, Zora wasn't done. At 10:15 a.m., she walked the length of the executive corridor herself. No entourage, no press. Just her. And as she passed the empty offices, the glass walls reflecting her figure back to her, she could feel the weight of it all. Years of compromise, coded meetings, being included, but never embraced. She paused in front of the office that had once belonged to Sarah Klein, former VP of Human Resources. The same woman who told a new hire last year, "Just don't wear your hair like that during orientation. It's distracting." On the door, Zora left a post-it note. It read simply, "You were never qualified to manage other people's dignity." She didn't need to write anything else. Back downstairs, Karina intercepted her. "Media's asking if this was a mass firing." Zora paused. "No." She turned to face the cameras that had just arrived in the lobby. Crew from CNN, local news, even a podcast platform. "This isn't a firing," she said into the microphones. "It's a correction." Gasps, silence, a single camera flash. Then, applause from the staff. From the guests who had been watching since morning, from the people in the back of the room, the ones who had never been clapped for a single day in their lives. Zora didn't bow. She turned and walked away. Because the real work was just beginning. There were no balloons, no grand re-entry, no champagne corks or performative speeches. Just footsteps, soft, certain, echoing down the longest corridor of the Bennett Grand Hotel. Zora walked through the East Wing, where the original architecture had been preserved. Dark cherrywood panels, warm sconces, and floor-to-ceiling windows that had once overlooked nothing but forgotten rail tracks. Now, they looked out on a growing skyline, one that bore the mark of her vision. She was headed to the staff lounge. No cameras followed. No assistants flanked her. Just her and the sound of muffled conversations behind a half-open door. As she stepped inside, heads turned. Conversations halted mid-sentence. For a breathless moment, no one moved. Zora smiled softly. "Don't stop. I didn't come here for silence." But the silence held. Then, slowly, one of the line cooks, Luis, who'd been with the hotel since its first week, stood and clapped. Not the hesitant kind, not the slow, awkward clap of a man unsure if he was allowed to celebrate. It was the clap of someone who had waited too long to be seen. Others followed. Hands rose, palms struck together. Not thunderous, but pure. Zora took a seat at the nearest table. "No agenda," she said. "I just wanted to sit with the people who've kept this building alive." A young housekeeper named Marissa whispered, "Are you really bringing back the wellness fund?" Zora nodded. "And expanding it. Monthly stipends, on-site therapy, paid personal days, not just sick leave." An older man, Terrence from maintenance, asked, "What about the pensions? They froze last year." Zora's jaw tightened. "Restored, retroactively, with interest." A pause, then, "What about the folks who got pushed out?" Zora looked up. That question didn't come from staff. It came from behind her, from the hallway. It was Angela Reeves, the woman who had once been director of guest experience, forced to train the man who later replaced her without credit or title. The woman who had been erased. Zora stood. "I want you back," she said simply. Angela blinked. "Just like that?" "No," Zora replied. "Not just like that. Like this, publicly, transparently, and on your terms." She handed Angela a card, engraved black and silver. Vice President of Guest Empowerment. Angela's breath caught. "You created a department?" Zora smiled. "No, you created a movement. I just built a department around it." The room buzzed with emotion. No one cried. But they came close. Angela stepped forward. "Do I still report to you?" Zora shrugged. "Technically, yes, but I'm redesigning the hierarchy. The new chain of command starts from the bottom and rises. We don't build top-down anymore." Luis leaned forward. "So who's in charge?" Zora turned toward the room. "You are." A ripple of disbelief, then cautious hope. "You think we can run this place?" Marissa asked. "I think you already have," Zora replied. "While others were stealing credit, you were building excellence." She walked to the center of the room and stood still. "We're not just firing people. We're flipping the architecture. This hotel doesn't rise unless you rise. So from this day forward, no one gets promoted without passing through peer review. No one gets hired into management without a panel made up of hourly staff." Karina stepped in from the hallway with a stack of folders. "Employee equity shares," she announced. "Dispersed across all departments, First round goes to everyone in this room. Dead silence. Then a whisper from Terrence. I never thought. I'd own a piece of something like this. You built it, Zora said. Now you own it. Angela held up her new badge and read it aloud. Vice President of Guest Empowerment. She looked at Zora, eyes glistening. No one's ever put empowerment in my title. Zora smiled softly. They will now. And in that moment, in a staff lounge with no reporters, no investors, no prestige, Zora achieved something no boardroom ever could. She turned survivors into shareholders. She turned witnesses into leaders. She turned ghosts into a living legacy. It started not with a press release, but a whisper. An intern posted on social media. The Bennett Grand feels different, like it's breathing. A guest tweeted, they fixed the power dynamic, not just the lighting. By midday, the hashtag #TrollCrown Initiative was trending across platforms. Zora didn't seek the spotlight, but when justice moves with clarity and precision, the world pays attention. At 11 a.m., she stepped onto the rooftop terrace, the place she had once reserved only for VIP donors and visiting dignitaries. Now, it was filled with students, entrepreneurs, community organizers, and youth leaders from neighborhoods that the hospitality industry had long overlooked. A banner stretched across the glass balcony. The future of hospitality isn't whitewashed. It's reclaimed. She walked to the podium, wearing no corporate uniform. Just a deep navy-wrap dress, afro-textured and high-collared, her hair free, her presence entire. The crowd was quiet, curious. Many had applied blindly to a new mentorship program advertised as Leadership Without Gatekeeping. None had expected her to be leading it. Good morning, Zora said, her voice steady as the sky above. I don't believe in pipelines. They're narrow and one-directional. I believe in bridges. And today, we begin building one that leads from our neighborhoods to the top floors of industries we were never meant to enter. A ripple of applause. When I built the Bennett Grand, she continued, I didn't just want chandeliers and 5-star ratings. I wanted cultural excellence. I wanted a hotel where every scent, every sound, every face reflected the world as it actually is. She paused, scanning the crowd. But somewhere along the way, I let other hands reshape it. Hands that feared difference. Hands that erased names. Hands that locked me out of my own building because they could not imagine that a black woman could own all this. Her hand swept toward the skyline. Silence fell like reverence. I didn't come back to reclaim a company, she said. I came back to start a revolution. She turned to the first row, where 15 young professionals sat, students from HBCUs, community colleges, GED programs. All finalists for the Crown Fellowship's first cohort. You are not guests here. You are architects. You don't have to ask for entry. This is yours. The screen behind her lit up. Crown Campus, 2026. Opening date confirmed. Hospitality and Leadership Training Center. Owned, led, and staffed by Bennett alumni. Free tuition. Guaranteed apprenticeships. Global placement pipeline. Cheers erupted, but Zora held up a hand. Let's be clear. This is not charity. This is correction. She stepped down from the podium and moved toward the crowd. For every time they told us to straighten our tone, shrink our voice, soften our presence, we will build louder, sharper, and stronger. A student stepped forward. What if we fail? Zora smiled. Then we fail forward, together. A young woman, barely 20, raised her hand nervously. Dr. Bennett, why didn't you just sell the hotel and leave, after what they did to you? Zora's expression softened, but her answer was fire. Because leaving would have let them write the ending, and I don't hand my pen to cowards. Murmurs of awe passed through the crowd. I stayed, she said, so I could reopen the doors they tried to bolt shut. So I could make sure the next generation walks in without having to apologize for existing. Behind her, the rooftop began to fill with people from all parts of the hotel, kitchen staff in aprons, janitors in work boots, front desk trainees, former interns now promoted. And then, Angela. She walked to Zora's side, held up a set of keys and announced, "These aren't master keys, they're shared keys. One for every Crown Fellow, one for every door that's been closed on us. We don't wait for permission anymore." The terrace exploded with cheers, and somewhere in the back row someone whispered, "This isn't just a hotel anymore, it's a movement." They were right, because in less than a day Zora had transformed a place of exclusion into a sanctuary of reclamation. From exile, she had built a revolution, and the view from the rooftop, once reserved for the privileged few, now belonged to everyone who had ever been told no. The hallway was quiet now. It was the same one where she had been stopped, where the manager with the tablet had scanned her up and down like she didn't belong, where 2 security guards had escorted her out with the detached professionalism of men who had no idea whose space they were desecrating. Zora stood alone in that same corridor, now flooded with late afternoon light. Her shoes clicked against the polished floors, slow and deliberate. No security detail, no entourage. Just her, finally at peace in the place that once tried to pretend she didn't exist. Each painting on the wall had been changed. Where once there had been generic sterile art, now hung portraits of Black hospitality pioneers. Ella Crawford, the first Black woman to open a luxury inn in the South. Charles Devon, a bellhop turned general manager who revolutionized hotel training standards. Faces that had never adorned the walls of 5-star lobbies, but now did, in full dignity. Zora stopped in front of one of the new plaques, one she had commissioned herself. "This hallway remembers. For every time you were told to take the service entrance, this is your front door now." She didn't need to speak. Her presence said enough. Behind her, quiet steps approached. Angela. "I thought I'd find you here," she said gently. Zora smiled but didn't turn. "You ever walk through a space and feel like the air still carries the memory of harm?" Zora asked. Angela nodded. "Every day until today." They stood in silence for a moment, 2 Black women who had once been dismissed in these very halls, now standing as its architects. "Everything's in place," Angela said. "The last round of promotions is finalized. The first Crown Initiative workshop begins next week. We even have a waiting list for the mentorship program already." Zora nodded slowly. "Good. And the Leadership Council?" 51% are former hourly staff. Multilingual, multi-generational, and 70% women. That number made Zora close her eyes for a beat. She opened them and took a breath. "They said I was too emotional to lead," she murmured. "Too radical. Too Black." Angela scoffed. "Too brilliant, you mean?" Zora finally turned to face her. "I needed to walk this hallway again, not to erase what happened, but to reclaim it." Angela placed a hand on her shoulder. "You already have." Zora stepped forward toward the lobby. As she exited the corridor, staff paused their tasks. Some smiled. Some lowered their eyes in quiet respect. But all of them knew. They were walking under a new kind of leadership now, one built on accountability, on courage, on community. She passed the concierge desk. A young Black woman stood there now, head held high, natural hair in a crown of coils. She smiled wide when she saw Zora. "Welcome back, Dr. Bennett." Zora smiled. "Not back." Forward. She exited through the front doors, no longer needing them to open for her, because she had rebuilt the whole building from the inside out. The sun dipped low behind the city skyline, casting long shadows over the streets that had once ignored her. Now they bore the echoes of her footsteps, the weight of her restoration, the radiance of her revolution. And inside the hotel, no one dared forget her name again. Not because it was written on plaques or spoken in meetings, but because her story had rewired the architecture of the place. Because Zora Bennett had turned pain into policy, disrespect into design, and exile into empire. If this story of injustice and transformation moved you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories that turn pain into power. The story of Zora Bennett doesn't end in triumph. It continues in transformation. She didn't come to be a symbol. She came to be a catalyst. In every corridor she reclaimed, in every policy she rewrote, she planted a seed for others to rise, not through exception, but through expectation. The hotel industry will speak her name now, not in whispers, not with caution, but with the full knowledge that her kind of leadership isn't the future, it's the overdue present. And for every black girl who watches this story and thinks, could that be me? The answer is no longer a maybe. It's yes. Because the door is open, because the hallway remembers, because Zora didn't walk alone, she carried us all with her.